Abraham, first of all, thank you so much for coming into my life in so many ways. There's been a big change in the last year because of knowing you. And in so many ways, I live the ideal life. I have a wonderful wife. I have a great relationship with my son, my daughter, her husband. I have health. I live in my dream house. I have great friends, a great business partner. I'm self-employed. I do the things I want to do.
Your time is up.
I only have one contrast, and that's in my finances. In that, I seem to have really screwed it up. And I get the whole idea that nothing is more important than I feel good, and that the universe has aligned everything for me, so I can have whatever I want. And yet, none of that seems to make sense. The only thing I can ever focus on is the lack of money. And I keep attracting more lack of money. And I just keep going in that same circle. And I try your virtual reality. I try meditation. And then when I get alone with my thoughts, I have more of, wow, I don't have any money. That's why I'm here trying to do this. And the virtual reality is, that would be great. If I had money, then I could do those things. And so I just keep going in that circle. And then I start to see the unworthiness, and that's why I don't have money, because I'm not worthy. And I do that whole spin. How do I get aligned to what I want?
Well, what you are describing is the reality of not enough money is so big, it's so pervasive, it oozes in and out of so many aspects of my life that I can hardly get away from that thought long enough to get another seed started. It's like my garden is so full of the weeds of not enough that every time I try to foster a little plant of enough, the weeds of not enough sort of crowd it out. And that's a pretty good analogy because your thoughts are, because of law of attraction, connected to one another. So, and something like money that is tied to so many aspects of your life, it's hard to change the way you think about money. But it can be done. You just have to sort of make a decision. I'm going to find something about money where I feel more stable, because it's the way you feel about money. In other words, how I feel about money, how I feel. And well, how you feel about it is that there's not enough. How you feel about it is that there hardly has ever been enough. How you feel about it is that it comes hard. That's how you feel about it. And so your question is a very good one. How do I change the way I feel when so much of what I feel is based upon what I've been living? And we say, well, you could try virtual reality, but you've already explained to us that that's hard for you because when you get into virtual reality, it just reminds you can't afford the things you're visualizing. When we say to you, find something that you feel happy about and fixate on that, and if you don't keep beating the drum of not enough money, then you'll stop that resistance and you'll allow more money in. But something about money comes up so often, it seems like it takes money. So you have to find a way to separate money and your well-being in your mind. You have to start, what we would do is we would say, well-being comes to me in lots of different ways. It comes to me through clarity. We'll choose 5. It comes to me through clarity. It comes to me through physical well-being. It comes to me through the enhancement of other people in my life, relationships. It comes to me through experiences, and it comes to me through dollars. So abundance comes to me in 5 powerful ways. And most of the ways that my abundance comes is really, really working. I have great relationships and I have a really good body, and I'm clear-minded. I have clarity, and I have great friends, and I'm having a really good physical experience. In other words, my abundance is working. My abundance is working. And as you keep noting the 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 areas where you note abundance, then what happens is it just bleeds over into all aspects of your life. Esther loves the feeling of being in alignment, and she really does not like evidence in her life that she isn't. And this little escapade with the floor has been dramatic evidence to Esther that, at least on that subject, she has not been in alignment. It's all worked out, but it was the long, hard, slow way of going about it. And so she didn't like that feeling very much, and we encourage her not to think about that. Look for evidences of alignment. So Jerry got behind the wheel to start the monster bus before they left San Antonio. And the monster bus, prior to coming here, had been all over California. They went across the desert and went all through California and all up through California and back around and back across the desert and back over into Texas and parked the monster bus on the pad that they've built there for it. They have a place that has a sewer hookup and electrical hookup and a water hookup, and Esther just backed it in and put the feet down and set it down and turned it off. And it sat there for several days. And then they got ready to come here, and Jerry said, I think I will warm the engine before we get ready to leave. And when he turned the engine over, he looked at the speedometer and he said, Esther, you have to sit here and see this. The speedometer read 11111. She took a digital picture of it. I need evidence. She went and got someone from the building. I need a witness, she said. Evidence of alignment. Esther sees that as evidence of alignment. What are the odds, she said, that we could run all over California, everywhere, park the motor coach. Now, she did not notice it when they parked it because the trip meter was what was reading on the odometer. So Esther did not see it when they ended their trip. She saw it when they began their next trip. And we said to Esther, use that as your symbol of alignment. Don't think about the fiasco with the floors. Think about the speedometer lining up. In other words, watch for any little nitpicking evidence that you can find anywhere. Stretch it, exaggerate it, emphasize it, talk about it. In other words, look for the things that are working and beat the drum of what works. This is working in my life. 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 And what will begin to happen if every time you talk about there being a shortage of money, which is something not working, you talk about 4 or 5 other things that are working, the ratio of how you really feel about your life will begin to shift. It is our promise to you. There is so much more that you are about than about the dollars in your checking account. In other words, there is so much more to you. And everyone who knows you knows that. And yet in your economical environment, almost everybody wants to judge almost everybody by economics. And you have a very unhealthy relationship in that because there are those that don't have enough that feel unhappy about not having enough and complain to each other about not having enough. And then there are those who have not enough see that have more than they need, and those who have not enough complain about those who have more than they need, and so they keep beating the same drum. And those who have enough often feel guilty about having enough, and so what they have does not stay in a stable way. There are a very rare minority worldwide who are at one with dollars flowing in and out, 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 who do not use the meter of the dollars as the measure of their worth. We don't see you feeling uncomfortable about the air that you breathe. And we have to say to you, you process more air than the average person. It's worth thinking about, you greedy bugger. And the health that you live has been very remarkable. Way more than your fair share, we think, about that. We think you should be sick for a while and allow some sick people to get well, don't you? And you say, well, that's illogical. I don't think if I got sick, it would make anybody well. And we don't think that if you pinch yourself off from dollars, it'll give anybody any more. We don't think that anything that has to do with dollars has anything to do with worthiness. We just think it has to do with habits of thought. That's all. Habits of thought. So when you find yourself, we played with you, but we really weren't playing. When you said, this is going well, and 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 all of us could feel that the other shoe was about to drop. In other words, we could feel that you were building us up to let us know that while these things are going well, and everyone could feel also that while these things were going well, all of these things added up together that were going well were not as important to you as the one thing that isn't going well. In other words, because even though all of these things are going well, this one thing that isn't going well weighs so heavy in your experience that it sort of messes up the other things too. So that's the way we would do it. We would begin noting how many things are going well. We have a game that we have offered. Not very many people play it, but we have to say to you that of those who have played it, there have been very few exceptions who did not have, within a year, speedy turn around. We're not kidding you about this. It is a powerful game. You're wanting to make a frivolous, fun, light-hearted, good-feeling game about money. And because you can't ignore it, because you have to pay your bills, we think that the game about that can make a big difference in the way your energy flows around the subject. So get a columnar pad and list your monthly expenditures. And starting at the left side, put the biggest ones. House payment maybe, car payment maybe, whatever the larger ones are, all the way down to the smallest one. You may need a long columnar pad. It may not be so much, but list everything that you have promised to pay on a monthly basis. And never mind the overall debt. It's irrelevant. The overall debt is irrelevant because it's money in, money out, in and out, in and out. Just like you don't get up in the morning and say, well, it's going to be humid today, so I'll try to breathe all of the air that I'll need for the next 2 or 3 days now. Or you don't say, I'm going to be really busy, so I'm going to eat all of my meals this morning. And then the rest of the week, I won't have to take time to do that. In other words, in and out, in and out, in and out. So the same thing with dollars. In and out, in and out, in and out. The overall debt doesn't mean anything except in a very positive vein. It is summoning life force through you. So the debt is not a bad thing. It's a desire. It's something that lines up with you that you really want to fulfill. It summons energy through you. So make your lists and then say to yourself, I'm going to do my very best to keep all of these promises. In fact, it's going to be fun to keep all of these promises. And it's going to be fun to watch all of these columns disappear. I would like to be on a cash basis. And to begin with, the smallest column, I'm going to pay not once but twice this first time. And then say to yourself, with pride and mean it, I do my best to make all of my payments, and in some cases I pay them double. In some cases I pay them double. And when you pay it double, now some say, well, Abraham, it still seems silly to pay that one twice when you can't pay that one once. And we say, there is value in saying, I do my best to do all that I said I would do, and sometimes I do twice what I said I would do. And then what begins to happen, because you've made this game of this. Now, you know how you feel when you worry about going to the mailbox because you worry about the bills being there? Now, you have a game going, and within a month of this, it is our promise to you, instead of feeling dread when you go to the mailbox, you'll feel exhilaration about the game. In other words, because what's in the mailbox is going to be part of the game. It's like putting the pieces of the game together. And what begins to happen when the universe gets a whiff of the game that you're playing, not of the burden that you are fulfilling or the burden that you're carrying. When the universe gets a whiff of the game that you are playing, what happens is extra money begins coming in from unseen places. Different people, for different reasons, give you more money. Odd things begin to happen. Things that you couldn't explain if you tried to. Things that you cannot foresee. Things that we clearly foresee. Things will begin to happen. And so what happens is, as extra money comes, now instead of feeling buried by the debt and like there's no hope anyway, so I'll just use this extra money to do other things that don't improve the way you feel. Now, because you are invested in this game, you say, oh, look at this extra money. And then you double this, and you double this, and you double this. And what begins to happen is columns begin disappearing off the right edge until you begin to find only the essentials, and extra money starts coming into your experience. You begin to feel the excess money flowing into your experience. And in a very short period of time, you begin to relax. You begin to see that the universe is yielding to you. You begin to feel more responsible. You begin to feel more on top of things. 1 year. 1 year of playing a very fun game can set the tone of the remainder of your financial future. We're not kidding you.
What do you do with the thought of the bigger bills that you're not paying? That you say, well, I doubled this, but I didn't pay that one at all.
Well, when you're focused upon the other, you can't focus upon two things at the same time. And as that comes up, say, eventually I'll get to you. Or say, it's getting better and better. Or say, because of this game that I'm now playing, things are loosening up everywhere. So that the promises that you're making about future payments begin to be promises that you begin to believe. In other words, you just keep saying, and you say to anyone who asks or anyone who wants to hear, you say, I'm a responsible person. This is not the way I live my life. I am a responsible person and I do pay my debts and things are unfolding for me and everything's going to be all right. And you keep expressing it to yourself or to anybody who needs to hear it until eventually it becomes not just your mantra or affirmation that you are expressing verbally. It becomes this thing that you are feeling, you see.